It started with the kind of cosmic embarrassment humanity would never live down. The Zorvath mothership, gleaming like a silver dagger in the sky, hovered over Earth while every news camera, satellite feed, and amateur with a smartphone pointed up in awe. This was it, first contact, the moment all our movies and books had promised would be filled with wisdom, diplomacy, and the majestic meeting of two great civilizations. Instead, the Zorvath laughed. Not a dignified chuckle or a polite snicker, but a full belly-shaking howl of disbelief that shook their spindly bodies until a few even fell over on the bridge of their ship. They had expected Earth's apex predators to be titans worthy of galactic respect. They had prepared for dragons, gargantuan beasts, or at the very least something with teeth that glowed in the dark. What they found were pigeons pecking at French fries in a parking lot and a raccoon hissing from inside a dumpster. The broadcast went viral across the galaxy within hours. There was the raccoon shot, its little bandit face frozen mid-snarl as it dove for a chicken nugget. There was the footage of a pug in a raincoat yapping furiously at the Zorvath landing probe before tripping over its own leash. Entire alien talk shows dissected the video clips, wiping tears from their multi-eyed faces as they mocked humanity for being the dominant species on a planet apparently ruled by creatures that barely survived Monday mornings. Earth watched in horrified silence as the Zorvath released their own documentary titled Earth, Planet of the Puny. It featured ominous music, slow-motion footage of confused possums, and ended with the narrator declaring in a booming voice that Earth's food chain was less threatening than a salad bar. Humans did not take this well. Twitter exploded with outrage. Protesters in New York held signs reading "We have sharks, you jerks," while someone released a rap single about crocodiles that climbed the charts in 3 countries. Governments issued stern but awkwardly worded statements defending the dignity of Earth's biosphere, though it was hard to look dignified when the Zorvath kept replaying a clip of a goose attacking a plastic bag like it was its mortal enemy. The mood was grim. The United Nations held an emergency meeting that mostly devolved into arguments about whether grizzly bears were sufficiently terrifying or if someone should release the footage of that time a kangaroo punched a man in the face. It was Dr. Helena Ortiz, zoologist and caffeine addict, who finally snapped. Slamming her coffee mug on the table hard enough to wake a few drowsy diplomats, she demanded the floor and pulled up a video file. No speeches, no preamble. Just grainy footage of a honey badger wrestling a python twice its size. The room fell silent. They watched the creature bite, roll, and thrash like a demon possessed. They watched it get injected with venom, collapse for 2 full minutes, then shake itself off and resume the fight as if death itself were just a minor inconvenience. It ended with the honey badger trotting off, snake corpse in its jaws, looking vaguely annoyed. The aliens laughed again but less confidently this time. Helena was ready for that. She pulled up more clips. One showed a honey badger charging at a pride of lions with the swagger of someone who had paid rent on their territory. Another showed it digging into a beehive mid-attack, face covered in stings, utterly undeterred as it devoured honeycomb and larvae alike. The final clip was just a compilation titled "Reasons the Honey Badger Fears Nothing" set to heavy metal music. The Zorvath scoffed, but there was an edge to it now. They were scientists, after all, proud of their biological knowledge and their status as apex conquerors. The idea that this stumpy little fur ball could survive encounters that would kill most creatures 10 times its size annoyed them. They declared it an anomaly, an overhyped rodent, and certainly not representative of a planet worthy of galactic respect. That was when the wager was born. It began as a sarcastic remark from a Zorvath biologist whose name translated roughly to sneer of dismissal. He proposed, on live broadcast, that if humans truly believed this honey badger was impressive, they should pit it against the Zorvath's own apex predator, the Gorgoth, in a contest of survival. 1 hour, open terrain, no interference. If the honey badger lasted more than 10 minutes, the Zorvath would issue a formal apology to Earth and retract the documentary. If it failed, humans would admit their planet was, in fact, the galactic equivalent of a petting zoo. The challenge hit the internet like a meteor strike. Memes erupted instantly. Someone photoshopped the honey badger wearing boxing gloves. Others made fake movie posters titled "Badger vs. Beast: Dawn of Chaos." Betting pools opened worldwide with odds heavily against the honey badger, though a growing minority argued that any creature willing to fight lions for fun might just have a shot. The United Nations debated declining the wager, but public pressure was relentless. Humanity needed a win. Morale was at rock bottom, and besides, there was something appealing about the underdog story. When the day arrived, the arena was set on neutral ground in the Sahara Desert. The Zorvath constructed a massive transparent dome to contain the fight, complete with cameras broadcasting in every spectrum imaginable. They unveiled the Gorgoth with theatrical flair. The beast was a nightmare of claws and scales, standing 3 meters tall with acid glands that hissed ominously. It had devoured every predator on 3 different planets. The crowd gasped. Then the honey badger arrived in a metal crate labeled Sir Nibbles McFury, a name chosen by online vote. The creature emerged slowly, sniffing the air, looking singularly unimpressed by the crowd, the alien ship, or the nightmare beast roaring across from it. It strolled to the center of the arena, sat down, and began licking its paw as if bored already. Somewhere in the crowd, a human voice yelled, "Go get him, Nibbles," and the internet lost its collective mind. The Zorvath announcer began the countdown. Cameras zoomed in on the honey badger, on the Gorgoth's dripping fangs, on the tense faces of humans watching from around the world. At 0, the Gorgoth lunged with terrifying speed, claws tearing through sand as it charged. The honey badger did not move until the last possible second. Then, with casual precision, it sidestepped, bit the Gorgoth on the ankle, and trotted off as if it had all the time in the world. The crowd roared. The battle had begun. The Gorgoth roared, a sound that made the cameras shake and the audience clutch their seats, but the honey badger barely flinched. It simply glanced up with an expression that could only be described as faint irritation before returning to sniffing the ground as if searching for snacks. The Zorvath announcer's voice rose in excitement, describing the terrifying speed, the acidic venom, the many victories of the Gorgoth across galaxies, but much of the crowd was staring at the small, black and white creature now pacing in a slow circle, completely ignoring its monstrous opponent. It was as if Sir Nibbles McFury did not realize the gravity of the situation or simply did not care. When the Gorgoth lunged again, jaws snapping shut with the power to crush bone, the honey badger darted aside so fast the cameras struggled to follow, leaving the beast to bite into empty air and slam its head into the arena floor with a hollow clang. The humans erupted into cheers while the Zorvath spectators hissed in frustration. The Gorgoth snarled, tail whipping through the sand like a living whip as it swung around for another charge. This time, the honey badger did not run. It ran toward the beast instead. For a heartbeat the entire arena froze in disbelief. The size difference was absurd, a creature the size of a loaf of bread charging head-on at something that could swallow it in one bite, yet the honey badger leapt straight onto the Gorgoth's foreleg, scrambled up its scaled body, and sank its teeth into the joint where armor met flesh. The Gorgoth bellowed in shock, swiping and thrashing, but the badger clung like a furry demon, biting again and again with single-minded determination. Alien commentators began shouting over one another in disbelief. Viewership across the galaxy tripled as word spread of the impossible fight. Footage of Sir Nibbles hanging from the Gorgoth's neck like an angry necklace flooded social media streams. Memes appeared in real time, the honey badger photoshopped wearing sunglasses, riding the Gorgoth like a cowboy on a bull. The human crowd chanted its name in growing frenzy while the Zorvath military officials whispered furiously among themselves, some beginning to look uneasy. The Gorgoth finally managed to fling the honey badger off with a violent shake, sending it skidding across the sand. The creature lay still for several seconds, and a hush fell over the arena. Human spectators held their breath. The Zorvath announcer began a triumphant speech about the superiority of alien biology, only to choke mid-sentence when the honey badger rolled over, sneezed out a mouthful of dust, and stood back up like nothing had happened. It trotted back toward the Gorgoth with the same casual stride one might use to visit the grocery store. The Gorgoth switched tactics. Instead of charging, it sprayed a stream of sizzling acid across the ground, cutting off the honey badger's path and filling the air with choking fumes. The arena floor hissed and bubbled where the liquid touched it. Humans winced in horror while the Zorvath smirked, certain this would end the battle. The honey badger paused, sniffed the steaming ground, then calmly walked straight through the acidic mess as if strolling through morning dew. Its fur smoked slightly. It did not even blink. That was when panic began to spread among the alien spectators. Zorvath scientists argued in frantic tones, demanding to know why the acid was not working. The Gorgoth hesitated now, clearly unsettled by its opponent's refusal to die properly. It lunged again, aiming to crush the honey badger under one massive claw, but the creature rolled aside and sank its teeth into the monster's tail, gnawing with such ferocity that the Gorgoth howled and stumbled, thrashing wildly. Minutes dragged on. The Gorgoth grew frantic, acid glands hissing, claws digging trenches in the sand as it tried to pin down the tiny whirlwind of fur and fury. The honey badger fought with relentless energy, retreating only to charge again, tearing at joints, ears, anything it could reach before darting away. Cameras zoomed in on its face, jaws clenched, eyes blazing with the kind of determination found in creatures too stubborn to understand fear. Then came the moment no one expected. The Gorgoth managed to slam the honey badger against the arena wall with a sickening thud. Sir Nibbles went limp, sliding to the ground in a motionless heap. The crowd gasped. Even the alien commentators fell silent. For several long seconds the arena was utterly still except for the sound of the Gorgoth panting, blood dripping from its wounds. Slowly, the beast straightened, raising its head in a victory roar. Humans stared in horror, disbelief written across every face. Children in the audience began to cry. The Zorvath announcer, voice trembling with excitement, declared the fight over, proclaiming alien dominance once again to the entire galaxy. The Gorgoth stomped around the arena, bellowing its triumph, while cameras zoomed in on the unmoving form of Sir Nibbles lying in the dust. And then, with perfect timing and utter disrespect for the drama of the moment, the honey badger twitched. One leg moved. Then another. Slowly, groggily, Sir Nibbles pushed itself upright, shook the sand from its fur, and glared at the Gorgoth with renewed fury. The victory roars died mid-echo. The beast turned just in time to see the honey badger charge straight at its face with unstoppable rage. What followed looked less like a fight and more like a mugging. The honey badger climbed the Gorgoth again, this time heading straight for its head. It clamped down on one eye, biting until the beast shrieked in agony, then ripped at sensitive ears while dodging claws and acid sprays with impossible agility. The Gorgoth stumbled, roaring, blinded in one eye and bleeding from half a dozen wounds. The arena dissolved into chaos. Zorvath military officers shouted at technicians to cut the broadcast before the humiliation grew worse, but it was too late. Billions across the galaxy were watching as the mighty Gorgoth, terror of 3 systems, bolted across the arena with a honey badger attached to its face, crashing into walls and howling in fury. Finally the Gorgoth ripped itself free and fled to the far corner, sides heaving, clearly unwilling to continue. The honey badger sat in the center of the arena, panting but defiant, licking blood from its claws like a king surveying conquered lands. The Zorvath High Council hastily declared the battle a draw, citing technical malfunctions and environmental factors, but no one believed them. The image of their apex predator cowering from a creature that weighed less than one of its teeth was already spreading across every screen in the galaxy. Earth erupted into celebration. Sir Nibbles McFury became an overnight legend, hailed as the bravest creature alive. Statues were proposed. Songs were written. Children wore t-shirts proclaiming Fear the Badger, while memes crowned it Emperor of Earth. The Zorvath, however, were silent. Their pride was wounded, their reputation shaken. And somewhere deep in their command ship, away from cameras and broadcasts, alien generals began speaking in hushed, angry voices about how this could never happen again. The silence from the Zorvath High Council after the battle was louder than any roar their champion had given. Across the galaxy, commentators and talk shows replayed the footage of the Gorgoth's humiliating retreat on endless loops, adding dramatic music and slow-motion zooms on the moment it bolted with the honey badger clinging to its head. Entire comedy channels dedicated themselves to analyzing the fight in exaggerated detail, pointing out how Sir Nibbles paused mid-battle to scratch itself as though bored before resuming the attack. Humans celebrated for days, parading statues of honey badgers through city streets while children painted their faces black and white in tribute. But beneath the noise and chaos, on the Zorvath command ship orbiting Earth, anger boiled like a volcano preparing to erupt. The alien generals gathered in a dimly lit chamber where holographic maps flickered above the table. Pride was everything to the Zorvath, and pride had been shredded, stomped on, and broadcast to billions by a creature barely the size of a backpack. General Vorvik, his scales dull with shame, slammed a clawed hand on the table demanding explanations from the scientists. How could their apex predator lose to something without armor, venom, or even a proper tail weapon? The scientists mumbled about unpredictable behavioral patterns, unusual resilience, and possibly neurological instability, but their excuses only fueled the fury spreading through the room. The High Chancellor hissed for silence, and declared in cold tones that the honey badger could no longer be dismissed as a curiosity. It was a threat to their dignity, their military image, and perhaps even their galactic dominance if left unchecked. The decision was made in that meeting with ruthless efficiency. If this creature could survive venom, acid, and claws, imagine what it could do if its ferocity were harnessed rather than mocked. They would capture it, study it, replicate its resilience for their soldiers. And if it proved uncontrollable, they would wipe it out before the galaxy forgot the embarrassment of the Gorgoth. Orders were given to assemble a covert team to seize the remaining honey badgers from Earth under the guise of scientific research. No one would know until it was too late. On Earth, oblivious to these plans, humanity basked in victory. News anchors interviewed zoologists who struggled to explain why honey badgers behaved like tiny berserkers with a death wish. Merchants sold stuffed honey badger toys with tiny capes. An action movie was announced before the week ended, starring an exaggerated CGI version of Sir Nibbles that punched aliens through walls while delivering cheesy one-liners. Politicians, sensing opportunity, gave speeches crediting human courage and resilience even though everyone knew the humans had done nothing except open the arena door and hope for the best. It was during this media frenzy that the Zorvath struck. A research ship landed in South Africa under official permission to study local wildlife for peaceful purposes. The crew wore friendly expressions and handed out pamphlets promising scientific cooperation. At night, when cameras were gone, they swept through the savannah with drones, tranquilizers, and containment units, capturing honey badgers by the dozen. They worked quickly and efficiently, vanishing before sunrise with cages full of snarling, snapping creatures loaded onto their ship. Their first mistake was underestimating the holding cells. By the second day, the honey badgers had already chewed through insulation panels, shredded power cables, and stolen every piece of food not welded shut. One technician reported seeing a honey badger casually open an air vent, climb inside, and disappear into the ship's walls like a furry phantom. Security forces hunted it for hours, only to discover it sitting inside the kitchen freezer eating frozen meat while hissing at anyone who approached. The second mistake was assuming the creatures were solitary. By the third day, the captured honey badgers began working together in unsettling ways. One distracted guards by throwing scraps of stolen food while another snuck behind them to chew through restraints. Ventilation shafts echoed at night with the sound of claws scurrying through metal tunnels, followed by sudden power failures and missing equipment. A mechanic swore he saw 3 honey badgers working in a team to unscrew a panel before disappearing with his toolbox. By the 4th day, panic spread among the crew. Life support alarms blared twice when critical wires were severed. The engineering chief reported acid leaks after something bit through a coolant pipe, though no one could explain why bite marks were present on high-pressure tubing 20 meters above the floor. Soldiers sent to sweep the maintenance decks often returned limping and bleeding from ambushes that came from shadows, vents, or sometimes underneath their own bunks. Then came the reactor incident. Deep in the ship's core, where only authorized personnel were allowed, a lone honey badger somehow bypassed 3 security doors and entered the primary reactor chamber. Cameras captured it gnawing on glowing cables while technicians screamed over intercoms for someone to stop it. Drones moved in but slipped on oil slicks mysteriously spread across the floor moments earlier. By the time soldiers arrived, the honey badger had vanished again, leaving half the reactor offline and the engineering crew in full mutiny. The High Council grew nervous as reports piled up. Entire squads were now assigned solely to hunting the creatures loose in the ventilation systems. At night, crew members heard scratching above their quarters, followed by the occasional thud and distant, mocking growls. Supplies went missing. Weapons vanished from locked armories. One officer woke to find 3 honey badgers asleep on his bed after apparently stealing the blanket right off him. No one could explain how they bypassed electronic locks designed to withstand space pirates. Tensions reached a breaking point when security footage revealed at least 6 honey badgers gathered in the hangar bay, dragging tools toward a disassembled shuttle as though attempting to build something. The creatures scattered when approached, but the image of them working in eerie coordination spread through the crew like wildfire. Scientists argued this was impossible, that honey badgers were not capable of organized construction, yet the evidence was undeniable. The final transmission before communications went dark showed a lone honey badger perched on the captain's chair of the bridge, surrounded by fleeing crew, staring directly into the camera with unblinking eyes. Then the lights cut out, alarms blared, and the ship drifted silently in orbit above Earth, its fate unknown for several hours. When power returned, half the escape pods were missing, 3 decks were on fire, and the honey badgers were nowhere to be found. Some claimed they had launched themselves toward the Zorvath homeworld. Others swore they saw them crawling into cargo ships bound for distant colonies. Whatever the truth, one fact became undeniable across the galaxy. The creatures the Zorvath once mocked as puny had now spread beyond Earth, and no one could say for certain where they would appear next. The first reports from the Zorvath homeworld came as garbled transmissions filled with static, panicked voices, and the sound of alarms wailing in the background. At first no one understood what was happening. The captured honey badgers had vanished from the research vessel after disabling half its systems, but the assumption was they had escaped into the wilderness of Earth or been incinerated during the chaos. It was only when a freight ship docking on the Zorvath capital reported crates ripped open from the inside and crew members missing shoes, food, and most of their pride that the terrifying truth began to surface. The honey badgers had not simply escaped. They had migrated. No one knew how many there were at first. The creatures spread like living shadows, vanishing into sewer tunnels, ventilation systems, and abandoned warehouses. Isolated incidents poured in over the next week. A storage depot lost power when someone chewed through the main power conduits. Entire chicken farms reported massacres where not a single hen survived. A military base claimed its automated turrets were sabotaged after greasy paw prints were found on the control panels. One officer swore he saw 3 honey badgers dragging a fuel canister across the tarmac while others provided lookout, growling at anyone who approached. Then came the incident in the Botanical Research Center, where one honey badger fell into an experimental growth accelerator used on alien crops. Security footage captured the moment its body twisted, grew, and stabilized into a larger, sleeker form with faint bioluminescent markings along its fur. The creature blinked, stared directly into the camera, and then calmly released every other captured honey badger before vanishing into the night. Scientists reviewing the footage later swore the mutated creature seemed thoughtful, as if intelligence had bloomed behind those wild eyes. Days later, a voice spoke across every intercepted transmission on the planet. It was not a Zorvath voice. It was low, guttural, and carried the strange echo of something struggling to form words for the first time. The translation drones rendered it in chilling simplicity. "We are many. We are coming." Then the signal cut out, leaving every government on the planet frozen in disbelief. The first true attack hit a week later. A fuel refinery exploded after honey badgers tunneled beneath its defenses and chewed through coolant pipes until the entire system overheated. Fire crews reported being driven back not by flames but by coordinated swarms of the creatures wielding stolen welding torches like weapons. Surveillance drones caught glimpses of them moving in eerie formation, larger ones leading packs of smaller ones through smoke-filled corridors. At the center of it all stalked the mutated honey badger from the research lab, now bristling with scars, armor plating stolen from fallen soldiers strapped crudely to its back. It was soon given a name whispered with dread across the Zorvath networks. Empress closed under the unyielding. Cities fell into chaos as the uprising spread. Supply lines were severed overnight. Communication towers collapsed after their support beams were chewed through. Power grids flickered and died as swarms of honey badgers sabotaged transformers, ignoring traps, poison gas, even automated laser defenses. The creatures moved with terrifying cunning, retreating when confronted only to reappear somewhere else hours later in greater numbers. Scientists confirmed the worst fears after analyzing recovered corpses. The growth accelerator had altered their biology, enhancing neural pathways, increasing coordination and learning speed. They were evolving faster than anyone could track. Desperate, the Zorvath deployed elite shock troops armed with flamethrowers and nerve gas. Entire battalions were sent into the badger-infested tunnels beneath the capital. None returned. Helmet cameras transmitted confused firefights, soldiers firing wildly at shapes darting through the darkness before signals cut out amid screams and the unmistakable growl of thousands of tiny throats. When rescue teams finally ventured in, they found only shredded armor, claw marks on every wall, and a single message carved into the metal floor with something sharp. Leave. Panic gripped the population. Refugees fled cities overrun by honey badger swarms riding in stolen military transports. Broadcast stations fell silent one by one as the creatures chewed through communication lines. Rumors spread of badgers hijacking orbital shuttles, aiming to take the fight into space. One unconfirmed report claimed a swarm boarded a cargo freighter mid-flight, slaughtered the crew, and crash-landed it directly into a military fortress before pouring out of the wreckage like a living tidal wave. Back on Earth, humans watched the news feeds in horrified fascination. For years they had been mocked as primitives by the Zorvath, yet now the galaxy's proud conquerors were being driven to their knees by creatures Earth had mostly ignored except when they raided chicken coops. Politicians called emergency meetings to discuss whether humanity should intervene before the chaos spread beyond the Zorvath system. Others argued it was poetic justice and perhaps the galaxy deserved whatever was coming. The Zorvath High Council attempted peace talks in a last-ditch effort to stop the destruction. Drones delivered messages offering food, territory, even entire continents if the honey badgers would end their attacks. The reply came not in words but in action. A swarm tunneled beneath the council's primary meeting chamber during negotiations, collapsed the floor, and sent half the ruling elite fleeing through smoke and dust while Empress Clausunda herself climbed onto the shattered podium. Cameras captured her standing amid the wreckage, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, before she growled a single phrase through stolen translation equipment. Everything. Then she vanished back into the tunnels as explosions consumed the chamber's lower levels. The rebellion escalated beyond control. Entire war fleets were recalled from distant colonies to defend the homeworld, only to find shipyards sabotaged, engines disabled, and navigation systems gnawed into uselessness. Swarms of honey badgers poured through docking bays under covering fire from stolen plasma cannons mounted on improvised vehicles. Soldiers reported creatures dragging wounded comrades away alive, though no one knew for what purpose. It was in the midst of this chaos that humanity received a direct transmission from Empress Clausunda herself. Her face filled the screen of every major broadcast station, eyes glowing, scars crisscrossing her armored body. The voice that spoke carried both menace and strange intelligence, promising the uprising would not stop with the Zorvath. Earth, it declared, would soon witness the birth of a new empire stretching across the stars, ruled not by aliens or humans but by the unstoppable fury of her kind. The alliance between humans and Zorvath was formed not out of trust or friendship but out of sheer desperation. For centuries the Zorvath had dominated entire sectors of the galaxy, crushing rebellions, conquering planets, and laughing at the primitive ways of other species. Now their fleets burned, their cities lay in ruins, and their people lived in constant fear of small, fur-covered creatures that seemed to multiply faster than anyone could kill them. Humanity, watching from a safe distance at first, had slowly realized that the honey badgers were no longer a spectacle or a source of memes and late-night jokes. They were an empire in the making, one that cared nothing for politics, technology, or treaties. The day a honey badger warband hijacked an orbital refinery and used its thrusters to crash it into a Zorvath military base, killing thousands, was the day human leaders finally accepted the truth. Either they stopped this uprising together, or the galaxy would belong to the Badgers. The first joint meeting between human generals and the surviving Zorvath commanders was tense. Old insults still lingered like smoke after a fire. The Zorvath hated admitting weakness, and the humans hated the memory of being mocked on interstellar broadcasts for their so-called puny biosphere. But as satellite footage rolled showing entire Zorvath cities overrun, warships sabotaged from the inside, and swarms of armored honey badgers riding stolen tanks through smoking streets, pride no longer mattered. Plans were drawn for a counterattack combining human ground forces with Zorvath plasma artillery and air support. It would be the largest military operation either species had ever attempted, aimed directly at the heart of Empress Clausunda's new empire. Training began immediately. Human soldiers accustomed to fighting wars with drones and precision weapons now drilled alongside towering Zorvath infantry wielding plasma lances longer than trucks. Cultural differences caused endless arguments. Humans preferred speed and stealth while Zorvath doctrine emphasized overwhelming firepower and rigid formations. The only thing uniting them was the growing understanding that the enemy was unlike anything either had faced before. Entire seminars were devoted to honey badger tactics, showing soldiers how the creatures tunneled under defenses, chewed through armor plating, and used stolen explosives with suicidal fearlessness. One video showed a honey badger dragging a live missile into a bunker before calmly trotting out moments before detonation. The instructor ended the session with a single grim sentence. "If you think they will retreat, you will die." As fleets assembled above the Zorvath homeworld, reports from the surface grew worse. Honey badgers had taken control of 3 more cities, converting factories into war foundries producing crude but effective armored vehicles covered in spikes and scavenged plating. Aerial drones filmed entire battalions marching in eerie formation behind Empress Clausunda herself, now the size of a large wolf, her body bristling with alien technology strapped across her back like trophies. Her forces used plasma weapons ripped from fallen soldiers, power armor taken from dead generals, and communication systems hacked from abandoned bases. It was as if every failed attempt to stop them only made them stronger. The first battle began at dawn over the shattered remains of Voris City, once the pride of the Zorvath Empire and now the honey badger capital. Human dropships screamed through the sky while Zorvath artillery lit the horizon with fire. For the first time in weeks the badgers retreated before superior firepower, vanishing into smoke-filled streets as infantry forces advanced block by block. Soldiers cheered as objectives fell, banners were raised, and commanders announced the enemy was finally breaking. Then the counterattack began. Honey badgers poured from sewers, rooftops, and hid in tunnels in numbers no scout drones had detected. They hit supply lines first, cutting off ammunition and fuel before swarming isolated squads with terrifying coordination. Entire platoons vanished under waves of fur and claws. Armored vehicles found their treads jammed with debris while explosives detonated beneath them from tunnels dug overnight. Plasma artillery batteries fell silent one by one as swarms overran positions too quickly for reinforcements to arrive. What began as a triumphant advance turned into a desperate fight for survival before noon. By evening, the joint human Zorvath command realized the full extent of the disaster. Their forces were surrounded. Honey badgers had deliberately ceded ground only to lure them into the city's center where collapsing buildings and blocked streets turned heavy armor into trapped targets. Communication lines fell apart under constant sabotage. Soldiers reported badgers carrying stolen radios, broadcasting orders in perfect mimicry of Zorvath commanders to confuse entire battalions. One unit followed retreat instructions straight into an ambush where they were buried under explosives triggered from hidden tunnels. High above the burning city, human generals argued with Zorvath commanders aboard the flagship. Some demanded orbital bombardment to level everything regardless of losses. Others warned that destroying the city would only delay defeat while scattering surviving honey badger forces across the planet. The argument ended abruptly when the flagship itself shuddered under impact alarms. Somehow, impossibly, a honey badger boarding party had infiltrated through the landing bays using stolen shuttles. Security cameras showed them moving through corridors under covering fire from jury-rigged plasma rifles, cutting power lines and sabotaging engines before anyone could stop them. On the surface, the battle reached its climax when Empress Clausunda herself confronted General Vorvik, the highest-ranking Zorvath commander, amid the rubble of a collapsed government building. Soldiers on both sides paused as the towering alien warrior and the bioluminescent honey badger circled each other through smoke and fire. Vorvik carried a plasma halberd crackling with energy while Clausunda crouched low, scars glowing faintly across her armor-plated hide. Their duel lasted less than a minute. Vorvik swung with the strength to cleave steel in half, but the Empress was too fast, darting inside his guard to tear through his armor with claws enhanced by stolen alien technology. The general fell beneath a frenzy of strikes while his troops watched in stunned silence. The death of Vorvik shattered what little morale remained. Zorvath forces broke ranks, retreating in chaos as honey badgers swarmed artillery positions, drop ships, and command centers. Human forces tried to hold the line, but communications were gone, ammunition ran low, and every street became a trap filled with explosions and falling debris. By nightfall, the entire joint army was in full retreat toward evacuation zones, while honey badger forces claimed the ruins of Zorvath City as their new capital. As the last transports lifted off under covering fire, commanders aboard the fleet listened in grim silence to intercepted transmissions from the surface. The honey badgers were no longer hiding their intentions. Their empire would not stop with the Zorvath homeworld. Already swarms were preparing captured warships for interstellar travel. The next target, according to decoded messages, was Earth itself. Panic swept across Earth as news of the defeat on the Zorvath homeworld reached every corner of the planet. The images were impossible to ignore. Warships in flames, cities overrun, Zorvath generals fleeing in terror, while swarms of honey badgers raised banners stitched from scraps of conquered flags. Footage of Empress Clausunda standing atop the ruins of Zorvath City with plasma cannons mounted on her back like trophies played on every broadcast channel. Her message was simple and terrifying. Earth would be next. Humanity watched in frozen disbelief as stolen Zorvath warships rose from the homeworld's surface under honey badger control, engines roaring as they prepared for interstellar travel. Politicians shouted over each other in frantic meetings about planetary defense grids, orbital mines, nuclear counterstrikes, anything to stop what was coming, but deep down everyone knew the truth. Nothing had worked against them before. Across the galaxy, the honey badger empire spread like wildfire. Swarms poured into abandoned Zorvath colonies, seizing factories, shipyards, and weapon caches with terrifying speed. No army could hold them back. Entire fleets vanished after ambushes near asteroid belts where honey badgers tunneled into hulls before crews realized they had been boarded. Merchant vessels reported attacks in deep space from ships broadcasting surrender signals only to open fire at point-blank range once they closed in. Refugees fled toward human-controlled sectors, bringing stories of cities burning under banners marked with clawed paw prints glowing faintly in the dark. On Earth, militaries scrambled to prepare for invasion. Soldiers dug trenches across coastlines while engineers deployed orbital cannons built in frantic haste. Training camps filled with recruits learning to fight an enemy that tunneled under defenses, climbed over walls, and used captured technology like they had invented it themselves. Scientists studied honey badger biology for weaknesses but found only frustration. Their bodies resisted venom, radiation, extreme heat, even vacuum exposure for short periods. One laboratory reported a specimen surviving total heart stoppage for 6 minutes before standing up and attacking the medical team. The first honey badger fleet arrived in the solar system 2 weeks later. Stolen Zorvath cruisers descended through the atmosphere trailing smoke, while Earth's defenses opened fire. Skies filled with missile trails and plasma bursts as battles raged above cities from New York to Tokyo. Some ships fell in flames, but others punched through the orbital grid, crash-landing across continents as swarms poured out armed with plasma rifles, explosives, and sheer fury. Entire neighborhoods fell within hours as civilians fled before armies of clawed soldiers moving through streets with unstoppable determination. It was in this chaos that a desperate plan emerged from the shattered remains of the joint human-Zorvath command. Among the stolen data recovered from honey badger raids were recordings showing their obsession with a rare alien delicacy known as Krell honey, harvested only on the distant moon Apis 9, where gigantic insect hives produced nectar with chemical properties unlike anything else in the galaxy. Early footage showed honey badgers abandoning battles mid-fight to devour entire storage tanks of the substance. One Zorvath scientist proposed using it as bait on a massive scale. If enough Krell honey could be gathered into one location, the swarms might abandon their offensive long enough for orbital strikes to cripple their forces before they realized the trap. The plan was insane, risky, and depended on transporting thousands of tons of Krell honey across hostile space without being intercepted. But with cities falling daily and Earth's defenses collapsing, no one had a better idea. Massive tankers launched from Zorvath space hauling enough Krell honey to drown an army while human fleets escorted them through ambush after ambush. Thousands died keeping the supply line open as honey badger warbands attacked relentlessly, drawn by the scent even across the void of space. Finally, the bait was deployed in the ruins of Zorvath City where Empress Clausunda had established her capital. Rivers of golden liquid filled the streets, glistening under the burned-out shells of skyscrapers. Then the fleets pulled back and waited. For tense hours nothing happened. Smoke drifted across silent ruins while distant sensors tracked honey badger forces converging from every direction. Then they came. Tens of thousands pouring through tunnels, over rooftops, out of crashed ships, all racing toward the rivers of Krell honey with single-minded hunger. Even warbands attacking Earth abruptly retreated, abandoning captured territories as ships turned back toward the homeworld at maximum speed. Empress Clausunda herself arrived at the center of the city where the largest reservoir of Krell honey gleamed under floodlights. Cameras hidden in orbit captured her massive scarred form approaching slowly, sniffing the air as her armies gathered around her in chittering waves. For several long minutes she stood motionless as if suspecting a trap. Then with a roar she plunged into the reservoir followed by thousands of others swarming over one another in frenzy. That was the signal. Orbital platforms fired everything they had. Kinetic bombardments leveled entire districts while plasma lances turned night into blazing daylight. Nuclear warheads detonated across the city's perimeter sealing escape routes in walls of fire. The ground shook as explosions consumed block after block where honey badger armies had gathered around the bait. For 3 days the bombardment continued without pause until nothing remained but smoking craters filled with molten metal and the melted remnants of entire armies caught in the destruction. When ground forces finally advanced, they found no trace of Empress Clausunda. Some claimed she had been vaporized in the initial strikes. Others whispered she had escaped through tunnels before the bombardment began. Whatever the truth, organized honey badger resistance collapsed across the galaxy within weeks. Leaderless swarms fought on in scattered pockets, but without coordination they were slowly hunted down by joined human and Zorvath forces reclaiming lost worlds one by one. Months later peace returned in uneasy silence. Entire continents on the Zorvath homeworld remained uninhabitable wastelands after the final bombardment, while Earth rebuilt cities scarred by invasion. Treaties divided responsibility for hunting remaining honey badger warbands still roaming distant systems. A memorial on the ruins of Zorvath City marked the day two civilizations nearly fell to creatures once dismissed as pests. Yet rumors persisted. Traders spoke of distant colonies where entire garrisons vanished overnight, leaving only claw marks on walls. A mining ship disappeared near the edge of known space after reporting strange shapes moving through its cargo hold. And on the far side of the galaxy, a probe orbiting a barren moon transmitted its final image before going silent. It showed a single honey badger standing atop a ridge staring directly into the camera, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark as though waiting for something. Then the transmission ended and the moon fell silent once more.